All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and call the April 19th, 2018 Springdale Airport Commission meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Neil Johnson, Greg Collier.
Here.
Andrew Barker.
Here.
Joel Gardner.
Here.
Steve Smith. Here. Bill Schoonover.
Here.
Greg Willoughby.
Here.
All right, has everyone had a chance to look at the minutes from last month?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the March 15th meeting.
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The minutes are approved. Quickly, we'll go through comments from the audience. If anyone has anything that you'd like to bring in front of the commission. All right, we're going to move right in to Sarah. Sarah, I know you're busy. If you can give us a few minutes and maybe answer a couple of questions for us.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to give you an update on the status of Mr. Gary Howard's hangars. I apologize for not being at the last two meetings. At the February 15th meeting, as I was telling Rose, I was getting married. The March 15th meeting, I was on my honeymoon, but I am here now. The only thing that could possibly get in the way of me being in a meeting is Major League Baseball season, but the Royals aren't doing too well, so I imagine I'll be sticking around. So back in December, I believe the commission took a vote and requested that we move forward in eviction proceedings against Mr. Gary Howard if he was not paid in full by January 31st, 2018. I attempted to send a letter via certified mail to Mr. Howard. That letter came back unclaimed. However, we did not receive payment in full. I believe there was no payment activity. So we moved forward in serving him with a 3-day notice to either pay in full or vacate the premises. Mr. Smith posted notice at each airport hangar that Mr. Howard was delinquent on, and we attempted personal service on Mr. Howard through my office, and we have a saying in my office, if Steve Helms can't find somebody, they're not going to be able to be found. Sure enough, after many attempts, he was not able to serve Mr. Howard. That being said, the 3-day notice was sufficient to move forward on a lawsuit. Therefore, we filed an unlawful detainer lawsuit. What we're asking for in this lawsuit is, number one, obviously possession of the hangars. Number two, the price of rent and damages associated with it. And number three, we're asking the court to find that the property in these hangars and the offices are abandoned so we can take possession of the property and dispose of it so the hangars can be rentable again. We hired a process server to attempt to personally serve Mr. Howard on this. Again, there have been multiple attempts to serve Mr. Howard in person. Our process server has gone to 2 residential locations. He has contacted hospitals. He's tried to contact him on Facebook. Mr. Howard's phone number is disconnected. He's not able to contact him in any way. And he has an active warrant out of Springdale District Court. That being said, I did receive an affidavit of non-service from our process server yesterday on this, lining out all the attempts for service. The next step in this is to do a motion for warning order and serving warning order with publication twice in the local newspaper. We've not been able to serve via warning order because we did have to jump through all the procedural hoops. The rules of civil procedure require us to make a diligent effort to find the whereabouts of the individual before we move forward with newspaper publication. After those publications, then I will follow. I'm going to assume we're going to be filing a motion for default with the court on that. And after that, the court can make a final finding on all matters. I know some of the questions that the commissioners have had are, why can't we treat this like a storage unit and why can't we take possession of the property now? Number one, especially with the offices, I'm not sure that that statute applies to the airport hangars, but assuming it did, the provision under statute that allows a landlord to take possession of the property, there has to be certain verbiage in the contract that allows that to happen. That's not something that we currently have in our contracts, but it's something that maybe we do want to look to in the future to including that language in the contracts. If you have any other questions besides this, I'm happy to open it up.
how long are we looking, best case, worst case, on being able to move forward and clearing that hangar?
Couple of months. We've got to get publication. We should be, since I just got this affidavit, it will probably be next week before we can publish in the newspaper because we have to get a check cut to do that. It's got to be published for 2 weeks, and then they have 30 days to respond after that. I may go ahead and try to schedule a hearing with the court as soon as we can after the motion for default expires. We're kind of at the mercy of the court scheduling on that, but it's not a hearing that should require too much time. So I'm hopeful we would be able to get a quick court date on that.
And can we get some assistance from the city attorney's office on updating that contract with the verbiage of how it should read?
Absolutely. I am more than happy to include that language in there next time that there is a contract. We're happy to include that. Again, I'm not going to guarantee that we're going to be able to treat it as a storage unit based on that language. I'll need to do a little bit of research, but it certainly couldn't hurt to include that language, and perhaps some language having to do with the disposition of property so it's lined out.
Okay.
So we're looking at about 2 months at the earliest.
That's correct. And normally this isn't happening in any type of eviction lawsuit because if you've got somebody who's living in your house and not getting out, you're going to be able to serve them with paperwork. But whenever we have a commercial type situation where the whereabouts of the tenant are unknown, there are a lot of procedural hoops that we have to jump through, and I just can't get in front of a judge until every I is dotted and every T is crossed.
So the judge hopefully then will give us opportunity to take possession and then take the property and dispose of that to pay against the rents. And what about?
That's correct. That's what I'm requesting of the court.
What about the surplus?
The surplus?
If there's a surplus on, let's say,
You have money
let's
left
say an
over.
airplane sells for $10,000 and he owes $6,000, there's $4,000.
I would file an interpleader action and get that excess money deposited with the court. And so the money would be, if there's any excess, the money would be deposited into the registry of the court.
So updating the contract would be great moving forward, but can we do an addendum to the current contract?
No, because Mr. Howard had to be the party who is signing off on that, and there has to be a meeting of the minds. And so because if we want to do that for current tenants.
That's what I'm.
Okay. At the expiration of the current terms of the contract, some people are on month to month, and that could be an addendum that we could add at the end of the month. Anybody who has a lease, a term held lease, that can be updated into the next language.
Okay. Do we need someone to get with you perhaps?
I can get with
In
James
wording
on
that,
that. I can
or-
get with Wyman on it. That should be no issue whatsoever.
great.
It's just a couple of paragraphs to add into that.
Okay, great. Any other questions? All right, thanks for taking the time to come
Thank
meet
you
with
for
us.
your time. If you have any other questions, I'm around.
All right. James, tell us a little bit about our entrance doors.
They are ordered. They're supposed to arrive middle to late of June. So we've got it scheduled with them and Flooring America to work consistent together so that when one pulls out, the other one can put the new floor in. We'll have it all working. We're going to use our north entrance. I'm going to have Waste Management move that dumpster out. That way people can go in the north side of the terminal building and use that hopefully for, not more than a week to get the new ones
You're
in.
thinking that's how long it'll take?
Right. Well, the flooring, the doors should take 2 days, but the flooring's going to take the longest. Popping the old out, putting the new in, grouting. So,
No way to do half of that to where they can use one side to get in and without
well, the only
having
problem
to
is
go all the way
those
around?
floors are right in the middle. Where those old entrance mats have to
Oh,
come
where,
back
I
out.
see what you're saying.
So they'd have to not be able to step on the tile while the mortar's drying. So, if we could, we will. But the easiest way so everybody can not be interrupted while they're putting it in is throw them around the north side when all the major construction's going on. Now, when the tile's already set and dried, they can walk on it.
It might not be a bad idea to put a sign up a week prior or something, just so folks can prepare themselves for it. Not that it's a big deal, but
Right, and that's where I was gonna
Inconvenience.
get a few signs put up, says temporary entrance, and have it pointed over that way. That way everybody will know where they're going. And then Summit, we're going to unlock a side gate so that the people coming out can just go right out the gate rather than coming through the terminal.
Okay. And then you want to talk to us about the T-hangers?
We have two quotes, one from Flint Co. and one from A&J Construction.
Any questions from commissioners on the quotes?
Pretty big difference.
Is there any difference in configuration of the doors to address what happened in the past as far as the wind, or how's that being handled?
They have to put them in with the regulations of 150 mile an hour wind load, or 80 mile an hour wind load, which is what the original set was supposed to have been done too, but they just weren't installed right. Yeah, it goes for an 8-bay hangar.
Proceed with it, I recommend you apply for a grant.
Apply for a grant for it. Any other questions or any questions about the proposals?
The previous doors we put on, our outlay for those was approximately $90,000, wasn't it? Right at 100. I know that there was a change initially, but
Originals were how much?
when we did the other hangar, it was $100,000 for the doors is what we paid. This is about a 50, well, the least bid is about a 50% or 40% increase.
So when we asked for these, did we provide a standard bid reply form so that it could be laid out in comparable sections so that we could actually see where the differences truly are? Because with a close to $50,000 difference, what's missing or what's added? I mean, that's one of the concerns that I have, is that we've got such a very difference here, and not knowing, because we've got two completely different formats, to have to decipher. So my question is, did we send out a standard bidding form or no for a reply?
We just met them on site and showed them the hangar that we was going to put the doors on.
That's a significant difference.
And A&J broke theirs down, but
Right.
I don't see any breakdown on Flintco.
And while I always have a tendency to go towards apparent low bidder, I also look at the apparent low bidder and determine why they're apparently low.
I'd like,
A&J is also out there building his hangars on the airport. They broke ground this week.
So mobilization is discounted then, because they're already mobilized.
So how would this, Wyman, fall in as far as grants?
Can probably speak to that.
Yeah, so I think you have both grants open right now on the ADA side. If you remember, we got that PAPI grant just before the year switched over. I think it was on the June agenda. So I don't think you have your 910 grant for this fiscal year, which goes all the way till June 30th from the state, put towards anything yet. So this would be a potential for it. I haven't seen the estimates. What's the total dollar figure on it?
Range from 150,000 to 190 roughly.
So I think 150 is the cap on the 910 grant right now. If you go over that, you'd be pushed an 820 grant, but I think you could get it in the 9010 at that 150 number.
That's right where we want it to be then.
Yeah, that 148 is looking pretty good.
Well,
there.
and
Yeah.
the doors are, both companies are going to be meeting the same spec for criteria for construction. Same code.
I have a tendency to agree with Joel. I'd kind of like to see Flintco's breakdown. You know, what are we getting? Or are we missing something?
Sometimes they don't want the job because they got other jobs, and so they're going to bid it.
But it is hard to determine by not having
Breakdown.
line item side by side to be able to see that. So I do understand the concern with that.
And we can ask them, that's no problem.
Pretty sure that Jeff Mann has built several hangars on federal airports. I don't know if Flintco has built any hangars or not. That may be
Yeah.
reason for part of the difference.
I've spoken with the folks at A&J. They obviously building their own hangars there on the south side of that taxiway are fairly familiar with what's going on there.
Did we ask for a reference list? Previous jobs, references, that kind of thing, from either one of these? No, okay.
I've interviewed Flintco for other projects and stuff, so I'm familiar with them. Jeff Mann, I'm only familiar with the conversations we've had regarding the hangars that he's going to build.
Any other discussion on this? Is this something we want to go back and get a little more detail maybe, James? Or are y'all ready to move forward with something here?
Adam, when do we need to turn this in?
So the deadline for grant applications are the last day of each month to be on the next month's agenda. And so to be on the next ADA agenda, which will be the third Wednesday of May, would be the last day of this month, the 30th of April.
Do they have a cutoff date on that this year?
On when
If we
the...
push 1 month, does it hurt us?
No,
I think is what
it
he's
doesn't. Yeah, so the last, you wouldn't want to push past May 31st because that would be June's commission meeting, which is the last one this fiscal year. You wouldn't want to burn a next year 19 grant when you have some this year unused, right?
Yeah, that was my question, because
Yeah.
I think we got into a little issue with that when we did the remodel. I just didn't want to repeat and lose out on opportunity.
So we'd have ample time, you'd have ample time by next month's meeting to get it ready by the end of the month?
Yeah, and I would say this, though, you know, with the funding situation of the state as it is, which is not great, you know, they're only letting out a few grants at a time. Boy, it'd be good to be on 2 meetings before the end of the year instead of just 1. And so if you can get it in by, you know,
Need it by this next.
if you get it by the 30th of April, you get 2 months, 2 shots at it, as opposed to 1.
Actually, we really do need it now.
Yeah. And I mean, it wouldn't actually go to the commission until the 3rd week of May, and so you could obviously be getting some background information in that time frame over the next month before it actually sits in front of the commission. It could always pull it at the last minute if for some reason you found something that you didn't like.
Is that something we need to vote on?
Would need a direction of whether y'all want to apply for a grant or not.
Needs a direction whether you want to apply for a grant, also yes.
Okay.
I will move that we make the initial request for a grant.
AJ
We have to have, to do that, do we have to have the vendor identified in the grant? Who's going to do it?
I would think the state, yeah, for building projects, they're going to want to know who's doing it.
So we have to make that, if we're going to do it by the end of this month, we have to make that decision today.
So if we do this and we use, let's say, for example, A and J, and we find out in a couple of weeks that we don't want to do that, we can pull that application.
You can pull that application and then probably just submit a new one for the May meetings agenda. Yeah.
I did, I thought. No, I didn't, I guess.
Yeah, make your motion again.
Yeah, I would like to move that we make application for the grant with AJ presently, A&J,
I'll second that.
to get on the agenda,
I'll second that.
since
We
we
have a
have the
motion
option
and-
of pulling.
Nope.
Second on the floor. Can we get a roll call for that, please?
Barker,
Yes.
Gardner,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Schoonover,
Yes.
Willoughby,
Yes.
Collier.
Yes. All right, we'll move forward. Adam, if you'll move forward with us on that, thank you. I think it sounds like, do we still want to go ahead and have James do a little more research for us with Flintco?
Breakdown.
I would,
Yeah,
I would
we do.
like to see it
Be nice to
if nothing
compare
other
it.
than just for comparison's sake.
Right.
Peace of mind on that deal,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. Okay. James, anything else from you?
On our hangar rent, I spoke with Scott Davis. His dad passed away, so he says as of 6/1, he'll get his current.
Okay.
So other than that, there's a couple other people that's slow, but
How's the restaurant doing? Are they happy? Are they
they're doing great. I mean, they're always busy.
Very good.
Full.
very well?
Sure seems to be busy over there.
Yes.
Good,
There's a lot of people coming and going.
very good.
All right. So moving forward, Wyman, want to visit with us here?
The operations are fluctuating a little bit. They usually do during the winter time, depending on the weather. February is down, but it's normally down, so they're, and fuel sales are following the operations. We looked at changing out the LED lights at the airport, and when we presented to council, they asked that we look at a competitive, well, ask if we got competitive prices between cities planning through the bond issue to resurface Huntsville and Elm Springs Road this summer, and we'll be milling off that street. I've asked the engineers to calculate how much milling we're going to have. And basically, I've got 3 projects that I need a hard surface on, and there will be enough millings that we can take that ground up asphalt, apply a little bit of oil to it, and spread it on that driveway, and then roll it in and have a hard surface road. It'll save us about $50,000.
Great. Any questions for Wyman? Anything else from you, Wyman?
No?
Okay. Andrew, tell us a little bit about what you got going. Sure.
Okay, so I've handed you guys all these papers, and here you can see on the very front page is kind of the spot that we're looking at to potentially build a new building for True Track. I'm going to take off one hat and we'll put on a different one here. So it's just to the north of the existing building that is used by James and the guys there on the northeast side. And on the second page, you can see that we're talking about the blue area is kind of some ramp space. Sorry about the little notch out of the corner there. Google SketchUp's problematic sometimes. But so what we're proposing is basically a building that goes up to that 500-foot line, potential parking area there on the farthest north end, and then ramp space out there on the west side. Page number 4 actually is the one that's most relevant, I would suppose. We're showing about a 25-foot tall total structure there, 120 feet wide, potentially by 160. We'll probably actually build a little bit less than this, but we wanted to cover the absolute biggest we thought we might ever go in that space. So we're proposing basically a 25-foot tall building up at that 500-foot line, which is, of course, that's the zero boundary. But to, what's the other one? How far back is the other one, Adam? I don't remember. Another 100 some odd feet back there. So we obviously would need approval to be able to build up to that 500-foot line from the other one that's back there, the zero boundary. So just kind of wanted to get this in front of you guys. We're not in a super emergency mode to make this happen, but wanted you guys to kind of see where we were on this and what our thoughts are at this point. Obviously, we need this approval and then FAA approval before we really want to start development and getting with contractors and stuff like that.
Questions for Andrew?
How soon do you want to do this?
Yesterday would be acceptable, but no, our hope is to be able to be into a facility by early next year is what we'd really hope to be. So we want to move fairly quickly, but we're not in. So what it boils down to is we're out of space where we are right now.
My follow-up question would be, what are you going to do with the old place after that?
The old place we lease, so we don't
Okay.
own that. That's leased from Jim Youngkin's trust. So that would be available for him to do with, or the trust to do with as they choose at that point in time. So we were originally looking at some other options, and then through discussions I've had with both Neil and Wyman, realized that this might be a potential space for us to build here. Obviously leasing this land, we're not purchasing, we'll be leasing it from the city to make this happen.
Commission would, of course, he'd be doing a land lease from the commission, and they would have to determine the length of the land lease plus the area that we are leasing to him. This hangar is situated a little differently from the other 2 hangars. The other hangars, we only leased the property that was underneath the building on the first one. The second one, we leased them, they're paying a lease on the ramp that's between the buildings that can't be used by other airplanes. So any apron that can be used by other airplanes, they're not having to pay lease on. With this area, he's definitely, you would be leasing the land underneath the building, but you'll have to decide whether or not to charge him for the area that he's gonna put the parking and the apron on. And if he doesn't, if you don't lease it to him and then we build something next to it, then it would be common use. But if he
Well, that's-
leases it, then he controls it.
Yeah, that's absolutely something we would love to discuss and figure out as we move forward is there a way for us to do this that we can have some joint use space of ramp and or parking, whatever. We're definitely open to those discussions. We don't, we would love to see the airport development continue on that northeast side. So anything we can do to aid in that, we want to do.
Approximately what size is the ramp area that you're proposing on the north side?
It's 100 by 120-ish right now, but realistically, that is totally up in the air right now. If it needed to shift out a little bit more to the north so that others could use it, we would not have an issue with that.
That part's just for automobile parking?
He's talking, on the west side. So the automobile parking is,
Yeah, I was asking about the north side.
oh, okay, sorry. The north side, yeah, it's about 100 feet right now as well. Just kind of a rough guess, honestly. We wanted to make it far enough that, I don't know, you're all familiar with right there on 265. There's kind of an issue there as we get close to where that stoplight is. So we wanted to make it far enough away that you could get in that parking lot without being too close to that light, because we figured that was going to be disastrous. So, if we made that a common parking area and extended it a little bit further north, that would work great. Honestly, the further north we can go with that entrance, the better off we are, because it gets us away from that stoplight.
Approximately how many parking spaces would you actually need?
So
Forecast future spaces.
True Track's in a kind of a special growth phase right now. We've gone from 12 employees here about 6 months ago to 16 now, and we expect to be up to 20 here in the next 2 or 3 months, and potentially by the end of the year up to around 24. We're growing quite rapidly right now. So, if we had, 30 or 40 parking spots would do more than we would ever expect to need there, honestly. If we made it big enough to, be 50 or 100% more than that, then I think that would be really great to be able to help develop that northeast side.
Probably want the whole airplane ramp part though, wouldn't you? Right in front of your building on the...
Well, if we extend it to the north, there's a lot of ways we could make something work there. If, somebody else wanted to come in and put hangars, then we could make some adjustments to that and make a smaller ramp space there in front and extend it to the north. There's a lot of options that we could do there that obviously we'd want to work with you guys on.
With the thought of expansion onto the north, Adam, would you have any thoughts or ideas, concerns about the next tenant to the north and how this would all tie in? Any thoughts or comments that way?
How's the bus feel?
So looking at it like this, I don't see a lot of huge issue with it. You're either going to be orienting the building like this and sharing a parking with someone else to the north, or you turn it to where the door is facing north and you're sharing apron with someone. So either way, you're going to be sharing something with someone. It looks like it's probably going to be too big to get the parking behind it. And so I don't see a whole lot of concerns with it just on this conceptual view right here.
So our 500-foot limit is the key to this, is that correct? Or
yeah, if you remember that limit, that's your 0-foot building restriction line. However, the FAA did give a recent approval to a building to be placed at that line, which was the Georgia's expansion, which first U.S. Commission had to approve before it went to FAA. So it is not something that would affect your airspace. It's a planning surface, though, that it's your duty as Commission to protect as you see fit if you feel like it's going to affect your airport long term. And so if you're okay with it and the FAA is okay with it, then something can be built in it as long as it has a red obstruction light on it.
What's the height limit in that area there?
0 feet high. You have to go another 175 foot back before you get to that 25-foot line. Basically, at that spot, it goes up at a 7-to-1. So 7 feet back's 1 foot, 14 feet's 2 foot, so on and so forth.
I couldn't remember what the height of the George's hangar was, but somewhere around.
Yeah, it was around 25 to 28 feet. I don't know the exact height, but I think it was
Pretty
around
close.
there.
We were trying to keep it with what my memory was to about that same height there. Our concept.
Yeah. I think the way you've shown from what we discussed last time was this would be in line with the adjacent hangar as well.
Correct.
Pretty close in line with it. That's something the FAA cares about.
Okay.
Call it shadowing. It'd be shadowed by the other hangar.
What's our next steps?
Pardon me?
What's our next steps that we need to do?
I would indicate that you're in agreement that this is a good location and a good opportunity for the airport, and I think it is. It'll do two things. Currently, with the current administration with FAA, they've recognized the east side and are allowing money to go over there. With the past administration wouldn't, because we didn't own any of the hangars over there. Well, if the administration ever changes back to the other thinking, this would be a hangar that eventually at one point would become ours. So it kind of gives us an ownership in hangars and activity on that side of the airport. Plus, having a business such as this on airport property, I think is a plus. So I would say you express your desire to continue working out an agreement for him to build the hangar.
And of course, all of this is pending FAA approval.
Of course, that's correct.
So I'll make a motion that we go ahead and tentatively approve this pending FAA approval, and that we work out the logistics of a lease agreement after the FAA approval has been confirmed.
Got a motion on the floor?
I'll second it.
Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Gardner,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Schoonover,
Yes.
Willoughby,
Yes.
Collier,
Yes.
Barker,
Abstain.
Thanks, Andrew. Suzanne, you want to come up and tell us anything and specifically tell us a little bit about that?
So every other year, we have KCAC that brings in the Piper static displays here at the airport. So this year, they've decided to do it on May 2nd. And it's rain or shine. And in conjunction with that, Summit's going to hold their customer appreciation. And we're going to work with Fricksters on sending people up. It gives everybody here at the airport a chance to go up and try their restaurant. And we'll work with them to make that happen. You guys have any questions about the display? What types of planes or anything?
Similar to last year.
Yes, they come about every other year. We usually have some Cirrus on there. They have, oh gosh.
There was a Pilatus last.
Pilatus is typical that they have
And a
here.
Caravan.
Yeah. And they're really nice to work with. So we'll also have some snacks and stuff like that. The day before, we're doing a FAST team meeting there at the airport up in the conference room. So if there are any pilots that need to go through the FAST team training, please feel free to register online, or if you have any questions, contact us at Summit. We'll put you in touch with them.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is not on the agenda, but your business has come up a couple of times. Would you like to come up and visit with us and tell us how things are going for you?
Well, word of mouth's traveling, that's for sure. Staying busy. Two things. Need to talk to y'all about some signage, maybe at the southeast corner and the northeast corner, putting up like a 4x4 sign. A sign on the building on the east side. We have a lot of pilots that come in that don't even know the restaurant's open, which would be great. The other thing, we've had lots of requests for a deck, outside deck, just to throw that out there. Everybody, if you come up on a Saturday and it's 75 degrees, you can't find a place to sit out there because of all the families and kids. But other than that, that's pretty much That's pretty much it.
Well, I hear good comments, and I've been there multiple times myself, and it's been good. In regards to the deck, I'll tell you, we've addressed that quite some time.
Well, like I said, I'm just throwing it out. That's
Sure.
what the customers are asking
Sure.
for. So
I would say we'll table that for now.
that's fine. That's fine. Just letting you know how it's
All right,
going.
Thank you. Thank you
bet.
for coming up and visiting with us. The signage, we can certainly discuss. One thing possibly, I don't know if you've thought of this or if you've done this, but maybe downstairs before, by the elevators, maybe get a tripod sign or something like that.
Have that, I think.
Is there, is that there? Okay.
Yeah.
I knew it was a great idea, so. We can certainly discuss that, though, signage. I know you're, the entrance down there, if we wanted to discuss a different sign there. And I don't, other than that, where are you talking about?
Like on the very southeast corner of the airport, you know where you got the Springfield Municipal Airport?
Uh-huh.
Just below that, put signs there on both sides, like y'all have got yours,
I mean, like underneath ours.
Yeah.
Uh,
on Emma and 265.
Okay.
Maybe possibly one on the back of the building somewhere. We've got a banner up there on the railing of the deck right now.
Okay. We can discuss that. I don't know that we want to necessarily start a precedent with signage on that southeast corner by our sign, but we can certainly discuss that. Again, thank you for being here today. And Adam, you're up. Visit with us a little bit.
This is a little better copy of those printouts that you already have. So while those are being passed out, I'll give you a quick status update on a couple projects. The PAPI project, which has been finished up for a while now, we finally have a flight check scheduled with the FAA for next Friday at 8:30 a.m. So assuming everything goes well with the flight check, we'll be able to turn those PAPIs on, and they'll be added to the airport's 5010 report, so they'll be fully in use. Once that's complete, we'll make the payment to the contractor for the work and close out that ADA grant. That's that 9010 grant, which will be, I think, about $90,000 of reimbursement. However, since we haven't paid the contractor yet because they haven't been approved yet, you're only carrying about $15,000 of that. So you'll pay him and then you'll close it out and get reimbursed. So it won't be much of a cash flow situation for you. And that reimbursement usually comes in a week or so. On the runway rehab project, a few things. First of all, looking at our timeline, looking forward, the schedule right now is to advertise for bids for that project on the 13th of May. We will open bids on the 12th of June, about a month later, and then have everything ready at your June 21st meeting to approve the bids and then submit a grant application to the FAA. The FAA has gotten fully funded for the year now with the omnibus bill that came out about a month ago or a few weeks ago. So they're fully funded for the year. When I talked to the FAA this week, your project, everything's lined up, ready to go for it once the grant's in. We fully expect to be able to do both the pavement and the lighting pieces of the project. So we'll get bids, we'll get our grant to the FAA. While that grant's going through the approval process, we'll be closing out your current grant, which is for the design of it. You'll get your final reimbursement on that grant, and then you'll get your 10% match from the state on that grant. So there'll be a lot of grants back and forth this summer, but we'll be managing all that for you. A couple quick things on the runway. I guess one, so interestingly enough, as we were doing some of our final QC, we noticed that your runway heading is now right in between an 1836 and a 119 runway. You're right at 185 degrees on one of the axes, 185.3. So it's a coin flip on which way you want to go. If you want to keep it at 1836 or go ahead and make the move to runway 119. Talking with the FAA, they fully support, and my recommendation for you is going to be to leave it at 1836 right now. And the reason is because the charting process you have to go through to change a numeral on a runway is like a 3-month thing. It's actually like a 1.5-year thing, but the final piece of it is a 3-month thing. And I don't want that to try to be coordinated at the same time as a 16-day construction schedule. and making those line up perfectly. I don't want to have to adjust our construction time frame once we get it nailed down because the FAA missed a deadline by a month on their end. And so when I talked this through with the FAA, they concurred with that approach. They said, hey, technically, looking at the data, it's going to be 7 years before it actually needs to be a 119, where you leave the zone of it being either or, and it's just now a 119. That's about when you're going to want to remark your runway anyway, because it's going to be 7 years after the rehab. And so a little easier to coordinate with one painting contractor to make sure they're out there when the charts come out, as opposed to a $3 million operation to rehab the runway. So if y'all are okay with that process, that's what our recommendation is going to be. To keep it at 1836, the only cost to move it to 119 is going to be the numeral markings change from 1836 to 119, and the panels on the signs will change. They'll still be the same size, just all the red panels that say 1836 will be 119. But that's like $1,000 worth of panels. Okay. All right, so the bigger topic today is construction time frame. When do we want to do this thing? When we talked a couple of months ago, what was in the FAA's hands, y'all charged me with trying to figure out how to take a look at our weather data, which affects contract or construction time, and the airport's activity, and see if we can't blend those together to figure out what's the best time to do the project to have the least impact on the airport's operation. So we put this together with some data. I'm going to walk you through some of the things we looked at, and then figure out at the end if we can't concur on the right time to do this project. So starting with the first graph here, what we did here is we took the reports that you see every month, activity and fuel purchases, not sales, but purchases, for the last 3 years. We don't want to go too far back because your operations have obviously changed over time. And we graphed them. And so the red solid line would be your fuel purchases, 3-year average for every month of the year, and that shoots over to the right axis. And the blue solid line would be your operations. Again, the same thing, 3-year averages for each month, going back to the left axis. As you can see, those have a lot of peaks and valleys in them, and so we also threw a moving average in there for both of those sets of data, the dashed blue line being your moving average, which is like for March would be the average of February, March, and April, all combined into one data point. So it helps normalize some of those peaks and valleys, and especially when you're talking about fuel purchases, which one sell at the end of 1 month can make or break a month, and so pulling 3 months into one data point gets you a little bit better average and knocks out some of those peaks and valleys, which you can see with those dashed lines. So you can see that even better on the next graph, which takes out the peaks and valleys of the single point data and just looks at the two moving averages for February through November, because the end months aren't as critical. We're not going to do any construction in January and December anyway. So when thinking about which of these data sets is the best to use as far as an effect on the airport, we really felt like fuel purchases was a bigger deal. Although we love all of our 172s, from a financial standpoint, the fuel bought on a G3 or G4 operation has a lot more financial, for I think all parties at the airport is a big deal. And so although we wanted to look at both, we thought it would be best to focus on the fuel purchases and that data, how it correlates to weather data. So on the next sheet, looking at airport activity versus precipitation, now we have all our fuel purchases on the left axis, same red line, but we've also charted with the bar graph the average or historical average precipitation for each month of the year here at Springdale. So it looks like you would think it would. A lot of rain in the spring, it dies down in the summer, and then a little bit more in the fall. So this would run how you would think typical precipitation would run. On the right axis, you see the average inches of precipitation. And again, this is just historical National Weather Service data here. But again, not as far as we want to go, because a 10-inch rain on day one of a month isn't the same as half an inch every day in the month. So we go to the next graph, and we say, let's put some constraints on how we determine how weather affects a day of construction. At the bottom of this, you can see what we did. Here we looked at 5 years worth of weather data and said, we're going to call a single day of delay if it rains at least 0.05 of an inch, which is really just something more than a heavy dew. You know, we have some precipitation. When we talk about asphalt paving, which is a big piece of our project, any moisture on the surface is going to cause you issues in your paving. So we felt like that's something that's probably going to delay that day's worth of work. In addition, if we get more than a 1/2 inch of rain, we're going to assume that puts us down for 2 days. That's going to soak things pretty good, especially when you're working on shoulders and grading and haul routes or in the grass. That's probably going to knock you down a little bit longer. So you take that. You also look at temperature, because precipitation is not the only thing that affects asphalt paving. You got to have at least 45 degrees of pavement temperature to pave asphalt. And so we decided that if the average daily temperature was less than 45, that was probably a non-working day as well. And what you see here is, again, we have our moving average in red for our fuel purchases, but now we're also adding up the number of potential delay days in each month for rain and temperature. We stack them on top of each other, because that's your total potential delay for each month. And I'll give you just a second to take all that in. So now you get an even better feel of, for our operation, which is affected by temperature and by weather in construction, a lot bigger change in the potential issues in construction. And some obvious things you see, like there would be no temperature issues June through September, whereas you may have some cold days in April and May, like especially April we've seen, and March that we've seen the last few weeks.
How long do you say it's going to take?
Next page. So now what we've done is we know that we need 13 working days to get the job done. We have to have 13 days of people on site to do this job. So that's a flat line, purple bar. It's going to at least take 13 days no matter what month we do it in to do it. Okay? In that 13 days, we can take the information from the previous graph and say, how many weather, rain, or temperature days are we expecting to see in that 13 days? And we add that on top of our 13 days for each month. All right? So what you can see here is now we're charting our fuel purchases versus the total time it would take to get the job done, or the project length, which is going to be the top of each of those bar charts. So for instance, in February, it would take about 23 days, it looks like, to get the job done, whereas in June and July, we're looking at 16 days to get the job done. All right? But obviously, the fuel purchases in February are a lot less than June, July, and so that's why we want to look at both of them together, which sums all up on the last chart. We know how many average fuel purchases we have in each month. We know how many days we're going to be down. We can easily correlate those two and say, what's our total affected fuel purchases just for our construction time frame in any given month? And this is the chart we really want to look at when we're making decisions of how many fuel sales or fuel purchases will be affected depending on which month we do the job in. And if you look at it, June would be the least affected month, followed by, looks like a combination of either May or July, and then scooting back to April or August. And then obviously, I don't think we'd want to target January, February, March, September, or October. So this is the data I wanted to bring to you today. It's important that we get this information about what we want to shoot for in our contract, because our contractors that are bidding on it are going to need to know what time frame we're expecting them to do the work in so they can plan accordingly. And we want to put that in writing so we can hold them to a construction time as well. If it's 16 days, is it 24 days? Because that's going to depend on the month you choose. So we can hold them accountable to that and issue liquidated damages if it comes to it. So it'd be my recommendation, just strictly data-driven, to go with June, but I wanted to bring it up to the full commission.
Any questions for Adam on this? I think probably we're all in agreement to go with Adam's suggestion.
I would just throw a dart at a board, so I think you've done a great job.
I would say May or June myself.
That was my thought, was May or June.
May or June.
And keep in mind, obviously, if we get to a given window and we're a week out and there's a hurricane brewing coming our way, we would obviously push it back. So if we do shoot for June, we would have July and August as potential dates to fall back to. And so in our contract, we'll probably end up telling the contractor that it could happen any time between June and August. That way we have a time frame that he can be thinking about to do the work in.
Okay. You need anything else from us?
I don't. I will see you in a couple months with bids in hand, and hopefully we'll get low bids, and we'll be sending a grant to the FAA for the work.
Great. Thank you, Adam. I see we have some of our leadership class here. Guys, we're about a third of the way through with our meetings, so just hang tight. Do we have any old business to discuss? Comments from commissioners? We are adjourned.
Movement required.